Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everybody. Kamari Ellis here. Welcome to the Finance Rebel Show. This is the show where we help people increase their financial IQ so they can break away from the traditional financial living system, which is that of poverty, which is one of being broke, which is being destitute and hopeless. All right. But in order to change that, you have to do a couple of things. You got to rebel. All right. Like I said, everybody typically wants you to be in debt. Being in debt isn't a great thing, especially if you don't have the cash flow to sustain it. All right. I see a lot of times people are very adamant about using other people's money, but they don't understand that when you use other people's money, when you get somebody else's money for $1, you typically got to pay back too. So it's all about being ready and prepared and able to not just survive, but thrive in today's world from a financial standpoint. Again, I'm Kamari Ellis, the Finance Rebel. If you're just joining, please share, like, and comment. Get other people involved in the conversation. Today, we're going to talk about a couple of things. We're going to talk about how 401k investors can survive the next recession. Again, how 401k investors can survive the next recession. All right. But as we do, I typically do a financial term of the day as well. Today's financial term is asset allocation. Again, asset allocation. And so I'm going to read the textbook definition of it. Asset allocation is an investment strategy that aims to balance risk and reward by apportioning a portfolio's assets. And so basically what that means is, in layman's terms, is if you think about baking a cake, when you bake a cake, you need your flour, you need your milk, you need your sugar, you need your eggs, right? You got to put them all into a good mix or a good blend. If you have too much flour, the cake's going to be super duper dry. If you don't have enough eggs, the cake won't be able to stick together. If you don't have enough milk, right, it won't have like that soft texture, right? Same thing with investments inside your 401k. Yesterday, I talked about what an asset class was. I did that strategically because I knew today I was going to be talking about asset allocation. But inside of your 401k, you have different asset classes. You are able to invest in stock, typically, and cash and bonds, right? You can invest in stocks that are only in the United States. You can invest in stocks that are also overseas. You can invest in bonds that are only in the United States. You can invest in bonds that are overseas. So there's many other things, also commodities, things like gold, things like oil. There's ways to invest in that. There's ways for the average person to invest in that. All right. So, all of this kind of comes into play as I'm talking about how 401k owners can survive the next recession. So it's all linked up, right? So again, asset allocation is basically an investment strategy to balance out your risk and your time horizon to make sure your investments do what you need them to do. Now, there's some things you need to think about. There's some things you need to think about when you're looking at different asset allocations. All right. Time horizon, basically, how long before you'll need this money? So let's say you're 20 years old, you're just starting your job, and just for this example, you're going to work that job for the next 50 years. I don't think anybody does that anymore, but you're going to work that job for the next 50 years. You can practically invest all in stocks, right? Because also, again, yesterday I talked about asset classes. Each one of the asset classes has different characteristics. So we know stocks tend to go up and down with the economy. As the economy does well, stocks tend to do well. If the economy does bad, stocks tend to do bad, all right? Bonds, again, they are loans to different companies and sometimes governments. They tend to not be as volatile. The value of them does not go up and down, and they pay out income. But you're typically not going to get the same rate of return you're going to get with stocks, okay? Things like gold, things like oil, things like cattle, those are your commodities, things that come from nature, come from the ground typically. They do well in different seasons, all right? So sometimes they're up, sometimes they're down. Usually gold is really good when the world's in a panic. Right now, we've seen some pretty good performance from gold year to date. For the most part, we saw really good performance out of gold during 07 and 08. So all of those things really come into your overall asset allocation. All right. Now, connecting asset allocation with how 401k owners, how 401k investors can survive the next recession. All right. Everybody's been talking about a recession. Everybody's saying the recession's been coming. The recession's been coming for the last 10 years. It's funny. I hear somebody at least twice a week say the recession's coming. And I've been hearing that for the last 10 years. And if you look at it, the stock market's still up over 1,000% over that time frame. And no recession is coming. But guess what? Recession is going to come at some point. We all know that, right? What goes up must come down at some point. The question is, we don't know when the time of the hour is going to be. We don't know if it's going to happen tomorrow or if it's going to happen 2 years from now. But best believe the recession is going to come. So you should be prepared for it. And remember when I was talking about asset allocation just a few seconds ago, I said age plays a long part in that. Time horizon plays a pretty big part in that. So again, if you're that 20-year-old, you're going to work 50 years, your money's going to be in your 401k for the next 50 years, you can pretty much invest in the stock market because the stock market's going to go up. Typically, stock market's going to go down. Over the last, I want to say 40 years, the stock market on average has returned anywhere from 7 to 9% on average over the last 40, 50 years. So typically the stock market goes up. Typically the stock market tends to follow the economic cycle that we're in. And if you go back and look, the United States has been in an upward economic growth pattern since World War II. Will that change? Maybe. Will it change anytime soon? I don't think so. So you have to be mindful of all those things. You have to be mindful about where you're trying to go, again, when you're doing your 401k. Now, again, I'd use the example of a 20-year-old who's going to work the next 50 years. If you ain't got 50 years to go, you got to change your strategy, right? There are no cookie cutter solutions. Every financial solution, every investment solution, every tax solution should be customized for you. All right, I'm going to say that again. Every financial, tax, investment solution should be customized for you. There's no cookie cutter solutions. They don't exist. They don't work. And when people tend to promote them and people get into them, people tend to get hurt, right? They tend to lose money. All right. So just consider that a warning from me. Now, let's say you only have 5 years to go until your retirement and you're working at this job and you're 5 years out and you're like, you know what? I don't know when this recession is going to come, but I believe it's going to come and I believe it's going to come soon. What should you do? Well, if you've had your money in stock all that time, it's time to change things around, right? Just like when you're baking a cake, I did the analogy of the cake. If you want a chocolate cake versus a lemon cake, you got to add some different ingredients. You got to change some things, all right? You probably want to add more bonds to your mix because bonds tend to level out a portfolio. Bonds tend to pay an income sometimes, not always. Now, the whole goal of retirement is basically to turn the money that you've been saving all this time while you've been working or having your business into a paycheck for yourself. So let's say you got $1 million. Let's say you make $50,000 and you have $1 million. You can then turn your $1 million that, let's say it's saved, let's keep it simple. And we can invest that $1 million and get, I don't know, let's say 5%. That $1 million could easily generate 5% rate of return every year. What is 5% of 1 million? $50,000. So at some point when you get up in age or when you get a little bit older, you say to yourself, you know what, I've been working all these years, I'm tired of people at my job. Or if you're in business, I'm tired of my clients. Again, if you're in business, I'm tired of my employees. I'm not having fun anymore. I just want to go play golf and go on vacation and maybe play with my grandkids. You say, all right, I'm going to take that $1 million and I'm going to invest it in something that can pretty much give me a safe return of 5% every year just to replace my income. So my income doesn't change. All right. Now, so that's why it's important to think about time horizon, especially when you're thinking about retirement. Now, me personally, I don't ever plan to retire, but I do plan on one day being able to ride off into the sunset and just work when I want to work. Some people just want to retire and do nothing. I think I would get bored. I work with a lot of retirees and I see them and a lot of them get bored. They don't know what to do. And a lot of times they start spending money in the middle of the night on QVC. So I never want to be that guy. But again, looking at how investors can survive the next recession. Again, nobody knows when a recession is going to come. Nobody knows how long the recession is going to last. Nobody knows how bad the recession is going to be, right? You have to be able to survive through that. And again, the probability that your money, as long as you stay invested in the stock market or just invested in general, you should be able to survive. Now, I saw a lot of people during the last crisis or recession crisis pull their money out. They sold off everything. And when people do that, they typically sell at the worst time when the market's down. That's one of the reasons why you should work with an advisor. But I have a whole other lot of thoughts on that. I'm not going to go too deep into that. They sell at the worst time because emotions are driving their decisions. Again, most times market returns 7 to 9% if you're just investing in the overall market. But again, if you pull out too early before your time comes, when you need that money, you've lost, and there's no way to get that money back. So you got to be thinking about all these different factors. You got to be thinking about all these different variables and try to make the best decision for you. Now, what is a recession? Before we get too deep into this, a recession is when the economy slows down, when GDP growth slows down for, I want to say, 2 quarters, right? Usually nobody even knows that the recession is actually taking place until the economy contracts. And so people look at GDP, gross domestic product. Again, it's one of those fancy terms. It just basically means how much money does the overall economy pump out. And so the overall economy is pumping out, usually in the United States, $17 trillion a year. Break that down into quarters. Let's say that's like $4.2 trillion a quarter or something like that. So if we see the recession, I mean, let's see if the United States enters into a recession of, again, 4 million a quarter or 3.9 trillion a quarter for I think it's 2 or 3 consecutive. I have to look up the official definition. 2 or 3 consecutive quarters. That is a recession, the technical term of a recession. But that doesn't necessarily mean life is bad. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to lose your job. That does not necessarily mean that your business is going to go away. If you're planning ahead, if you're thinking ahead, you're knowing that, again, things aren't always going to be good. You know that life is about seasons, depending on where you're at. Where I'm outside of Philadelphia, you got summer, winter, fall, and spring. They all have different characteristics. Life has different seasons. It has different characteristics. And so you have to adjust your 401k to match those seasons. So, we talked about the early investor that's maybe 20 and they're going to work another 50 years. We talked about the older person who's at a job, same amount of time, but they're going to retire in about 5 years. Now, other factors you need to be thinking about. How well do you deal with risk? Does it bother you when you see your 401k balance go up and down? Does it bother you to think that you lost money? I know a lot of people get really, really antsy when they see the market drop. They get really, really antsy when they have this idea that all their money could just vanish like that. They're going to they have a lot of anxiety when they say, you know what, this is all I got. I don't have any other savings. I didn't save outside of my 401k. I didn't save on the side. I didn't start a business. I didn't buy any real estate. I just had my 401k. So what should I do? And they get really, really antsy because that's literally all that they have. And so, again, you have to think about what's the mix. Should you add in some stocks that are U.S. stocks? Should you add in some international stocks? Should you add in some bonds? Should you add in just some cash, right? Sometimes it's good just to sit in cash and to wait things out and to see what happens. If you look and see what happened during the Great Depression, which happened from like 1929 and 1934, or if you look at the last Great Recession we had, people that had cash made out, right? You can never have too much cash. Never, 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 never. All right. So, and the reason that is because when the recessions or the depressions hit, they're able to go in and buy things on the cheap. And so I tell people all the time when thinking about recession, or if you're really worried about recession, start paying down your debt also, right? Start saving your cash a little bit more. Stop going out to eat as much, right? Stop being so fancy during the holidays. I know everybody's about to drop a bag on presents for their loved ones. And that's cool. No hate, no shade. But think about it in a total picture. Think about what you're going to need 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, 24 months, 48 months, 5 years, 10 years down the road. And think, are you developing the savings to be able to do that, right? If something bad ever really, really happened. And, as human beings, we're actually programmed to be very short-term oriented. Why? Because, our brains developed during the time when we were running away from saber-toothed tigers and woolly mammoths. So it's like fight or flight. And you see that in everything we do. It's either we want to fight or we want to run away, or sometimes we freeze, right? So that's not what you want to do when it comes to investing. You want to have a plan. You want to know what your exit strategy is going to be. And I know sometimes it's a little intimidating, but it's not as intimidating as many people make it out to be. Again, most of it is really based upon how much time you got. How long are you going to be invested for in this 401k? And then the other thing is to make sure that you rebalance and check up on your 401k a lot. I get a lot of complaints a lot of times from people that work at big companies and their 401k providers don't come through and really help them with their asset allocation, to help them invest in what they need to invest in. And that's really sad. But you can do it yourself. Just start studying. You could always ask me questions as well. I'm more than willing to help. But again, think about how long you have. Think about if you are really sensitive to the swings of the market. Again, if you see your 401k balance, and again, I'm talking about 401ks, 403bs, 457 plans, TSPs, plans for the government, any of these retirement savings vehicles that are out there in the market. They're very similar. Some have some nuance, but for the most part, you put your money in. A lot of times, your employer matches. The money grows tax-free. You get to pull the money out, and that's when you have to pay tax or roll it over to an IRA, right? So they're all pretty much the same for the most part. Also, other thing you need to think about, thank you, Kia, over on Instagram, is that a lot of people have a lot of old 401ks or leftover 401ks or what they call orphan 401ks that are at old jobs. That's money that's just sitting around that needs your attention, needs your love, right? So you want to go and you want to gather those all up. I typically don't suggest people roll them over into their current job's 401k because you don't have as much investment freedom and flexibility. I usually suggest people take those old 401ks and roll them into an IRA. You could also look at a self-directed IRA as well. I'm not going to go too deep in that, but what I will say is with a self-directed IRA, you have a bit more freedom to invest in really what you want. You can invest in things like gold. You can invest in things like real estate, like actual property, the property real estate, the bricks and mortar. But there's a lot of rules to it. And so that is not for the person who I would say has some sophistication or, some curiosity about what's going on. But it can be really powerful if you know what you're doing, just like anything else, right? But, again, those old orphan or old leftover 401ks, roll them over into an IRA, start looking at them, start investing into them or start investing them, right? Making sure they're fully invested the way you want and not just leaving it somewhere else because then you're just a number somewhere and nobody really cares about that. Now, if anybody has any other questions about 401ks, about the potential upcoming recession, feel free to hit me up. Tomorrow, I am doing a Q&A, an hour-long Q&A over on my Facebook page. That is on my IG, current IG. That is on my Facebook page, the Finance Rebel page. That's everywhere. So if you want to come on over If you want to submit a question to me, just text me at 484-278-1357. Again, at 484-278-1357. If you want me to cover that question during tomorrow's Q&A. Again, it's tomorrow, Wednesday, from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. over on my page. And you can get that information on all my stuff, right? On all my pages. And hey, if you are interested, if you are interested and continue to have conversations about money, wealth, taxes, investments, come on over to the Financial Rebel Academy. We talk about all things money. If you're on Facebook, it's on Facebook. So come on over to the Finance Rebel Academy. Just type in Finance Rebel Academy in the search bar on Facebook and come on in and enjoy the group. We talk about all things wealth, all things money. If you are really serious about increasing your financial literacy, financial education, you got to get around people who are at least having some of the same conversations. You typically don't get skilled just by sitting in the closet, reading a book. You got to have somebody to talk about it with. You got to have somebody to bounce ideas off with. All right, so come on over to the Financial Rebel Academy. It's totally free. I'm just a finance nerd. I love to talk about the stuff all day long. So that's why I do that. And my heart is really into teaching and giving back to the community. So again, anybody have any questions, hit me up later, but I will be back during the next broadcast. Kamari Ellis, the Financial Rebel out. Thank you for watching the Financial Rebel Show. Remember, nobody does anything by staying in their comfort zone. Nobody achieves anything by staying in their comfort zone. So today or tomorrow, get out and do something that's a little different and a little strange. All right. I'll see y'all next time. Y'all have a great night.